All right, we're going live. And it is about 6:45 here in Colorado, Mountain Daylight Time. And so that kind of spreads the time all over the world. I realized when I was out in California that was on Pacific Time. It was 5:45 instead of 6:45. It's a little bit early, and I know this is a little bit late for people on the East Coast, but we also have people coming in from all over the world. Let's see who we've collected here. Quite a few. The first, of course, as usual, is Optical Man Jeff, KE0OG. Hello, Dave, from a rainy Sioux Falls, South Dakota, where it's 42 degrees. Well, it is 29 degrees here, and we have snow on the ground. Dennis from Idaho says hello. Smoberdine says hello from Ohio. I opened the Amateur Extra Study Guide for the first time tonight. Congratulations. Says 73 from K8STU. Be sure to go to the ARRL learning site. It's learn.arrl.org. Use your ARRL credentials to get into it. And then in the operating section, you can find the Amateur Extra videos, which are all there, and they will match the study guide section for section. Okay, Don Zed, evening fellow Augies from a cooling Minnesota, KC0DWZ, Eddie K6SDW, howdy. Harry Rundle says hello, Dave, AC3EK here. Harry in Overly, Maryland, a balmy 52 degrees, so that is balmy. We're sitting here at 29 degrees. George Van Wagner says, Wagner says, greetings from currently cloudy Los Angeles from KE6EPC. Yes, my son is down in Santa Monica right now. He's a video kind of guy, and he's attending some sort of a film show or something like that. He got one of his shorts was well reviewed by one of the film shows, one of the many film shows. It was pretty well done, I thought. Of course, I'm proud of my son. 3 Henry 21, Conrad KN6VMK from Bethel Island, California. I've just made the jump from a beginner's VHF UHF HT to an Alinka DR75T for base mobile. Very good. Too bad Alinko gets overshadowed by Yaesu and ICOM. It does. It's not in the same league in terms of sales, marketing, and so on, but they are there. I saw them at Dayton. I did not see them at Pacificon. I did see both Yaesu and ICOM at Pacificon. By the way, regarding the Pacificon videos, I have a whole bunch. They're interviews with the exhibitors. And I plan to get a bunch of them up there this coming week. My assistant will be here tomorrow, and we'll work on getting all of those done. So, yeah, so you can see what it was like out there, what the vendors have to say. Elecraft was also there, as was Flex Radio. Okay, Robert Lucan, 73 from the Space Coast, balmy 77. We'll compare that with our 29. Chuck Schreiber says, good evening, Dave, and all Augies. N5KVO from South Texas, currently 70 and enjoying my front row seat in Dave's classroom tonight. Well, good to have you here. By the way, I did speak at Pacificon. Unfortunately, I didn't record it. My wife says it's one of the best talks I've ever given, which is, of course, means I wouldn't have recorded it. It seems like every time I do something good or have a great pratfall that would make a great YouTube video, I'm not recording. I had one incident on the motorbike where my front wheel went into a hole and I went end over on the thing. This was quite a few years ago. Would have made a great video, but wasn't recording. So that one time when I was trying to get home a little too quickly and the front wheel got taken out by a rut and I broke my arm and stuff like that. Of course, I wasn't recording, so, oh well, one of those things. Yeah, Michael C, KI5VRJ/AE, extra, new extra. If I were W5YI, what's his name? We could toot that little horn that he toots. Congratulations on your extra. Good evening from Louisville, Texas. Lee McElroy says hello from Arkansas. Joe McConaughey, AG7XH, hello from Western Washington. Ted Clapham. VE6AMR, hello. Anthony Becerra says, evening, Dave. It looks like about 1 million volts, hello from the UK. Bob O'Born in La Junta, Colorado. W0JFK. Well, it's interesting. Rich Ranch or not. Howdy from Robert, W5ENG. Bradley Ericstad. Howdy from Rainy Port, Aransas, Texas. W5BRE. Yeah, it's clear right now. 29 degrees outside with 91% humidity. The barometer is rising, so I'm guessing it's going to be a clear day tomorrow. Carrie Eakins, KK4LGO, Atlanta, Georgia. Hi there. James McDonough. All right, Dave, watching from England. Good to have you. Chip McGinnis. Hey, guys, from Kansas City, Missouri. Kevin Smith, KI5YFL. Howdy, Dave, from Arkansas. Jeff Dauphiny. Greetings to all from 84F in Charlotte, North Carolina. Recently set up a Chameleon MCOM2 version 2 and fed half-wave. Works very well. Well, very good. Very good. Yeah, they make some really solidly built antennas. 10,000 volts, or no, I think that's a million. Hello from the UK, MW7ANT. ZAA7F, good morning, David, from Riyadh in KSA, which I guess is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And welcome. I think you're one of the first to join us from Saudi Arabia. Good to have you. Taylor Bauman, good evening and hello from Rochester, Minnesota, where it's probably cold. Glenn Martin says hello from Far West, Missouri, 54 degrees and 0 QFT. 8 Balric, good evening, Dave, from Wisconsin, where it is 42 degrees. Okay, it's a little warmer than here. Brian Mullins, Dave, could you tell me what is best practice for securing my LMR 400 to my tower? I have a 70-foot telescoping tower. I'm about to install my antenna and coax to it. Brian, I would say that you probably are going to want to extend the tower all the way. And you will attach the coax in such a way that it hangs to where the tower can't chomp it up as it goes down. So it's got to stay loose from that. I'm not sure I know the best practices for that, since I've never had a tower. But definitely you don't want that coax to get pinched, or for that matter, overstretched. Some people may keep it in a spool at the bottom and reel it out from inside the tower. I don't know. So if somebody has some good ideas here, that would be great. Let's see, that's from Brian Mullins. If you've got some ideas, let me know. I've not done it. I would say the first thing to do is to call the tower company and find out from them what their recommendations are, but even better to find out from them where you can go nearby to find examples of that tower and see how they do it and see what they have to say about how it works, because LMR 240 is reasonably heavy. Not 240. LMR 400 is reasonably heavy cable, and I mean, it's got a lot of strength to it. But the fact that it's heavy means it'll probably get blown around in the wind. And you don't want to have a situation where it works good one day, but the next day the wind is blowing the cable the wrong day, so it gets caught up in the mechanism coming down. That could be very expensive. Felipe Lewis, hello from Dallas, Texas, said Alpha 7F says thank you, and it's good to have you with us. Bob O'Born, by the way, I had my first contact with Spain and Italy last night using my 991A and my G5 RV. And he's W0JFK. Well, congratulations to you. It's always fun to work DX. Different parts of the world, you've got people more or less likely to speak a little English. I know that usually the DX contact is one go around. You give your call sign, they come back to you, give a report, then you give your report, and then that's it. They're off to the next contact. People in Japan are a little different. They will do that, but then they will go one more round. And that's it, the one more round. And they don't really understand much English. But if you can say, transmitter 100 watts, antenna dipole, okay, and they turn it back to them, they'll say something nice, and then they'll go off to the next one. I like that better, but I've only noticed it common for Japan. Okay, let's see. Say from Southern Kentucky. Gets from Brian. T-Ham Hobby. Echo 2 4 MTA. Hello from Thailand. Wow. Echo 2 4 MTA. Very nice to make your acquaintance. We have Saudi Arabia and Thailand on tonight. Usually we have someone from Australia, and we'll see how things go. We've got people from all over the world. Good to have you. Roz Brown, W0NBG. Hi, Dave. Checking in from Lakewood, Colorado. Snowy and wet here. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, it's 28 degrees here, so it was about freezing all day. So even though it was kind of sunny, it didn't melt any of the snow. So, Monty Bates, hello, everyone from Waynesville, Missouri, KF0GPX. And Gaston Bastitessa says, hi, Dave, I'm restoring a Gap Challenger DX antenna, 73 from Argentina. And we're picking up a lot of continents tonight. Lima Whiskey 1 Echo Alpha Alpha. And good luck with your restoration there. Hope it works well for you. Paul C. Victor Kilo 4 Delta Papa Charlie. Hi, Dave. Greetings from sunny Brisbane, where it is late spring. An aviation update, please. Oh, I will. I will give you. It says, let's see, Rich Ranch or not. Somebody makes standoffs to mount at the top of each section. When tower is lowered, the coax festoons between standoffs. Most telescoping tower manufacturers can provide the standoffs, which makes me think a good place to call would be DX Engineering. Their first and foremost business is towers. So I really would look at the towers. Now, Paul asked for an aviation update, and I do have an aviation update for you tonight. First, of course, I did get my sport pilot license. Did get my sport pilot license from the FAA. And I went out to Carson City, they've got a school out there that does sport pilot. Pretty much that's all they do. They had a little sling airplane that I flew, which once you got into it, that was a story unto itself. But once you get into it, really nice little plane. I had no trouble landing it. Every landing I made was perfect, as opposed to what happened to me a couple days ago. The aviation update is that I broke my airplane. I was landing what I thought was a routine landing on an essentially windless day. And I came down and I floated a little bit. And so I just, if I get a little bit of float, I just wait it out. I mean, the aircraft's going to slow down and come down to the runway. Well, it came down pretty hard and then bounced way up in the air and came down really hard, which surprised me quite a bit. But what surprised me and dismayed me even more was that snapped off the front wheel, and I skidded on the stub of the front wheel for about 50 feet until the airplane came to a complete halt. So I broke off the front wheel, which is not an unusual accident. In fact, it's so not unusual that the FAA or the NTSB doesn't even want to hear about it. And I flattened out there's some spring steel struts that come down for the main gear, and they flex outward when you land. If you flex them too much, of course, you end up bending them, and I did that. So my airplane doesn't work. I'm working with the insurance company now, just starting the process. We've got to get estimates and all that kind of thing like that. And one of the things the insurance company insists on is that they check the engine, because if the prop comes to a sudden halt, and I'm not sure that it did because it kind of sheared off the ends of the prop, so it made several revolutions before it stopped. But if it shears off the prop, it can stop the engine very suddenly. And you got that much mass moving inside the engine, and it can break something. So the insurance company wants the engine inspected, meaning taken apart and look at the crank and the rods and the pistons and things like that. Make sure nothing got cracked or anything like that. So I'm just beginning the process. I've run that landing through my mind dozens of times since Tuesday, and I'm equally stumped. Yes, there was a prop strike, Paul. There definitely was a prop strike. It ruined the prop. What I discovered was the prop's got some sort of composite exterior, but it's filled with wood. And the ends, by about that much of the prop on both sides, the coating was peeled back, and then the wood inside, you could see where it had been using the runway as a file, because it filed it down quite a ways. So I'm thinking that there is a possibility that it won't be terrible. So that's where it is right now. I'm terribly embarrassed. I mean, it is nobody's fault but my own. I was the only person in the airplane, so how can I blame it on anybody else? There was, as far as I know, no mechanical failure. Why I bounced so high, I don't know, but then I'm not an experienced pilot. So I don't know if the engine will need to be rebuilt or merely inspected. I'm hoping merely inspected. But what they told me, since the aircraft's only insured for $40,000, it's pretty cheap for an airplane. The guy warned me if the engine costs were too high, he might total it. But that would be terrible, because I'm not going to get another airplane for $40,000. That was a really good one. So anyway, that's the status on flying. It's sort of like having your tower fall over, or you accidentally feed power from one radio into another radio, and it lets the smoke out. It's that feeling of, I think I just made a major blunder. Fortunately, I shut everything off inside the airplane, the master switch, the magnetos, and so on, and I let out my seatbelt and I walked out of the aircraft. And what is it they say? Any landing you can walk away from is a good one. I walked away from it. The Delta, the process that they have there is very effective, because moments after the people from the FBO got out to me with their equipment, the ambulance came up, and then the sheriff came, and then the airport's not actually in Delta city limits, it's in the county. So the sheriff came, and then the fire truck. So they got all this worked out, that if there's an incident at the airport, send these people and figure out the details later. And I was very impressed by all of this. So anyway, I have been in touch with the insurance company, and we're starting the process. I've got to get estimates and stuff like that. So I'm sorry to let you all down there. At least YouTube still works. Let's see, Ron L. Hello, Dave, from Echo 25, Papa Romeo Uniform from Bangkok, also KI5WJO. Well, Ron, welcome from Bangkok. We've got people all over the world now. And Jeff Dalfini put $100 in chat revenue, says, thank you for your recent report about Pacificon. Well, thank you very much, and there'll be much more to follow. I also got a very nice interview with the CEO of ARRL, who was there, and we'll put that up. And I met many Augies out there. In fact, I gave a talk, which was mostly just about the whole Augie experience. And it was well attended, and people seemed to enjoy it. And my wife said she was proud of me, so it must have been unusually good. So anyway, Jeff, thank you very, very much. Anybody else who would like to throw something into the chat revenue, you go down where you type in a comment, and underneath that is a $sign, and you click on that $sign, and then it walks you through the process. The reason this monetization of chats is here is because when somebody who has 5 million subscribers gets on, the only way you can get your comment seen is to throw in a little money with it. I don't follow that, of course. I try to look at every comment. And so, but thank you, Jeff, so very much. It's very much appreciated. I have a feeling some of that might be going toward the airplane here. I haven't looked at deductibles and things like that, but anyway, it is insured. It's not like I broke a toy and I have to throw it away now. So, and I'm not going to be able to do the work on my own. You know, if I had the tools and the help from the FBO people, I could probably replace those struts on the main gear. The front gear, I have no idea. I'm sure things are bent in there, so have to be taken care of. Tom W., KD9VWK from Indiana, is learning there. Steve Brannon, hi from Elkton, Maryland. And AG Play, yay. Steve Brannon from KC3NZY. Forrest Smorag, keep up the great work, everyone, and be safe. Yeah, I was safe. I was very safe. I was very embarrassed. And I realized that there were other aircraft from Delta that were in the air around the area, and here I had completely blocked the runway. So they guys from the FBO came out there, like 5 of them, and they brought their tractor and they hauled the airport off, or the plane off, and I didn't see much FOD or foreign object stuff. But they were very helpful, very kind, didn't give me a hard time, and so on. Phil, KE0OG, hello from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Sorry to hear about your airplane. Thank you. Paul C, VK4, DPC. Hopefully no prop strike. Unfortunately, there was. And as I explained a moment ago, we won't know how serious that was until they take a look inside the engine. So, Tim Backus took the little Cessna 150 upright at sunrise. Had a wonderful flight here in southern Arizona. I imagine it was very beautiful down there. We are going to Quartz Fest, my wife and I. Her sister lives in Quartz Fest during the winter in an RV park in town where they have an RV that's permanently there and that they rent out on a yearly rate. And so we'll spend some time staying with her and some time out in the desert doing some boondocking. We'll see how it goes. But we do have the Jeep. I've got all the equipment now to hook it to the motorhome so we can tow it down to Arizona and see how it goes down there. So, yes, I did have the prop strike. Sorry to hear. Harry Rundle, sorry to hear about your airplane. Yeah, nobody to blame but myself. I wish I could blame it on a bird strike or maybe a mouse running across the runway. Yeah, if it's an engine rebuild, I don't know how much it's going to cost. The airplane, I got it at kind of a discount because they had a similar previous accident. And however, on that one, it was because they lost some controls. They lost elevator control. And that was a pretty serious crash. So anyway, the engine will be looked at. We'll see, and I'll keep you all informed about that. Yeah, any landing you can walk away from is a good one. Steven says, sorry about the plane. Happy you're okay. Paul says, at Phil, ditto. Thank you. Read B8AS. No injuries. Glad you are okay. Yeah, the only thing injured was my pride, and that took a major hit. Leo Gustafsson, hello, David Alloggies, KK7CLY. Gustafsson. Okay, that's a little bit better. Albany, Oregon, 50 degrees and showers. Yeah, that's 28 here. Steve Brandon, you did not let anyone down. I let myself down, but just an accident. Ian Williamson's Victor Kilo 2 Lima Alpha, and that's in Australia. Okay, we're picking up the whole world here. Leo Gustafsson, hi, from hit Chicagoland in northwest Mexico yesterday. So glad I took the dive into that hex beam. Good. Glad it worked. Benjamin Otto, what happened to the aircraft is sitting in my hangar right now. It's sitting on the main gear and the stub of the front wheel gear, and it will be sitting there for some time. The airplane is definitely fixable. The only question is going to be about the engine. And the insurance company wants that engine inspected. And normally when you have a prop strike, you should definitely get the engine inspected. Okay. You will always be a fellow pilot. Very few get to accomplish this. So proud of you. Well, thank you. And, oh my, crack up, Dave. Yeah. Felipe Lewis sends $50 chat revenue. Appreciate your channel. Here in Dallas on October 18th, 2022, GPS was down, and airports had to scramble and utilized older nav aids. Also, this same thing happened about 6 months ago in Denver. Do you have any thoughts on this? Yes, I do. The problem is that the Army uses GPS a lot, as you might imagine. GPS is a jammable thing. The GPS satellites use what's called code modulation. And if you have the right codes and you're hooking onto it, the signal accumulates as a strength of the length of the code. But the signal itself is extremely weak. And so it's easy to jam. And you can jam it multiple ways. You can spoof it, getting it to put false results, or you can just jam it so nobody can receive it. What the Army does not think about, and I think this is quite rude of the Army, is that a great many civilians depend upon GPS. The Space Force may be in charge of the GPS, and I've actually been in the control center for GPS. But it is a military asset. And now the Russians have a similar system called GLONASS, and the Europeans are doing sort of something called Galileo, but it's been very much delayed because there are a lot of Europeans who are saying, why should we spend billions on a navigation system when both the Russians and the Americans have one? The FAA came out with what they called WAAS, Wide Area Augmentation System, or WAAS, to help people know what the errors were. And then Bill Clinton came out and turned off selective availability so that all civilians could get the good signal. Now, the problem, this is a real problem. The Army goes ahead and uses those GPS jammers for their exercises without bothering to tell any civilians. And yes, it means that the older navigation facilities, the Vortex and whatnot, that's VHF Omni Range, and TACAN is Tactical Aid to Navigation. And when you put the two of them together, it's called a VORTAC. And it's the old method of navigation, and the FAA was taking them out because of GPS, but now they've stopped. And you know, as a sport pilot, they don't teach me how to use it. I'm going to have to teach myself, because the problem with the flaky GPS is it can run airplanes right into the sides of mountains. And the Army is going ahead and practicing with this without regard for civilians, without regard for civilian life. You can kind of see where I stand on the issue. I realize that they have to prepare for scenarios when GPS can be jammed or spoofed. But doggone it, can't you simulate that part? Because it causes havoc among the civilian air traffic. Lives are at stake. But yeah, so GPS, the only way GPS can go down is if the entire system goes down because of a screw up at Falcon Air Force Station, or if a satellite goes down, but there's lots of redundant satellites, or it's got some sort of ground-based spoofing, which would have a local impact like Dallas or Denver or something like that. So that's what's going on with the GPS. And should you be kind of unhappy that the government is playing games with something that is vitally important, not only to the economy, but also to civilian safety? Yeah, Yeah, I'm upset about that. But I'm afraid I don't have the president's private phone number, so. I mean, I am a veteran, but they're probably going to say, well, you're done with the military. So. Anyway, Harry Rundle said, thank God you were not hurt or that the landing incident was not worse. Did not let us down. Heck, I turned my PC into a brick after I botched upgrade to the BIOS. New parts fix things, yeah. Glenn Martin, David, it's better to insulate a J-pole from a metal mast or have metal-to-metal contact. Either way. You can do it either way. And people do it either way. That little stub of metal down at the bottom is actually designed just as a holder for the antenna. The part above where the J is, where the J comes across, that's the real beginning of the antenna. Now, there's some people who will disagree with that, but, oops, let me get this right here. Got somebody coming in. I've got to hide their stuff. Yeah, so Glenn, you can go ahead and use that to strap to a mast. One thing I have done on your roof, you've got black vent pipes, usually coming about a foot. And it's the ventilation for the sewer. The sewage system in a house is a very low impedance system. The water flows by gravity. It's not a high impedance system like the supply water. It's a low impedance system, and because the energy developed as water flows in there is so low, if there is a vacuum in the system, it can really mess things up. So every device has a vent going up to the outside so that, like, as you flush your toilet, it'll pull air into the system. I have just taken a J-pole and with that piece on the end of it, just plopped it down in that pipe. It was a little too wide to go down into there, although you can, maybe attach something to it. I remember once I used a hose clamp to attach a screwdriver sideways so it wouldn't go all the way down into the vent pipe. And there it is. It's just really easy to deal with, and it's on your roof, and most people won't even notice it again. So, let's see. Okay, we answered Glenn's question. Rich Ranch or not, from Robert, W5ENG in Texas. Sorry to hear about the plane. Thank you. I am building an 80-meter horizontal sky loop. I've got one, or had one. I had one, used it for quite a long time. Is there a need to install radials or ground system for the sky loop when mounted at 32 to 35 feet? No, you don't have to do that. However, recognize that on 80 meters, and I also built one, full wavelength for 80 meters all the way around, most of your 80-meter energy goes straight up. That's great for NVIS. You're 40 meters starting to go out a little bit, and by the time you're down to 20 meters, you're going out pretty well, but the pattern is got to be one of the weirdest things you've ever seen. It's just got dozens of little lobes around it. So will it work? Yes. How do I know that? I had one. I used it for a long time. And then when I completely rebuilt my butternut HF9V antenna, I took it completely apart with the last screw and put it back together the way it was supposed to be put back together, and mounted it, ground mounted, with a bunch of radials. It worked really, really well. And so I took down the loop and cut it into more radials. And that worked really, really well. So will the 80-meter skyhook work? Absolutely, yes, it does. Absolutely, yes, it does. But don't expect to get a lot of distance or DX on 80 meters or anything like that. But you get up 20, you'll get some pretty good radiation there. Remember, 33 feet is a half wavelength for 20 meters. So that's an optimum height for signal patterns for 20 meters. Okay, Paul CVK4 DPC. Dave, I hope Loretta is over the shock of your unfortunate accident. Well, she's just very happy that I was alive. She wanted to come up to the airport and get me. And I'm going, Loretta, I've got a car here. That's how I got here. So anyway, she was just very concerned and has been very, very good at it. What was my wife's response? She was, her response was one of relief and genuine kindness. I mean, she didn't bawl me out or anything. It was very nice. So Eddie S6 SDW, a few years ago, I backed our Class A RV into the eaves of the house. 10K later, we were back on the road and the XYL was not amused. Yeah, that's easy to do. You get one of those great big boxes and back it into a tree just in a heartbeat. Josh Hayes says, thank you for your ham radio videos. They're very helpful. I'm having a hard time with winding my toroid for an end-fed antenna 160 to 6 meters. It's 49 to 1 Ballon. Okay, 49 to 1 Ballon. And you, that means there's going to be a ratio of 1 to 7 turns. Because, you know, you square the ratio to get the impedance ratio. The actual voltage ratio is 7 to 1. Usually that's 2 turns. What you do is you wrap your 7 turns, 14 turns around the coil. And then you tap it at 4 turns. And so it's an auto transformer. So you've got those 4 turns tapped going back to your coax, and then the one, and then the other 14. So you've got a 2 to 14 or 1 to 7 ratio. And the hot side of the other one goes to the antenna. Now note that since it's an auto transformer, that means the base of both of the windings are at the same voltage. And so that actually makes that an unbalanced to unbalanced. And that's what works for the end-fed half-wave antenna. It gives you an impedance transformation from 50 ohms to 2500, 2250 ohms, something like that. And that's a good impedance for the end. Now, the bottom of that thing is connected to the shield of the coax. Now, the shield of your coax can act as the counterpoise. When you feed something like this, you need a counterpoise. Remember, there's no such thing as a single electrical point, except maybe a proton. You've got to have 2 elements on it. Or you can connect a separate counterpoise. Now, you will get something coming down the shield of your coax. So you want to take that down to your ground rod, either at the lightning arrestor or just attach the shield. You know, what I did at first was I put 2 pieces of coax together with a barrel connector, and then I used a hose clamp to connect the barrel connector to the ground rod. And that worked really well too, till I got lightning arresters in. Otherwise, you'll have that coming into your shack and into your radio. So you want to avoid that. You can also take, if you're using like RG8X, about 9 rolls, you know, so that you create a choke ballon. The problem is it takes up about 25 feet of coax. And so that's a $30 or $40 device there. MFJ makes this, which is an RF isolator. This is the MFJ 915. It's about 30 bucks. This is, well, it acts like an a ballon relay. Actually, what it is a whole bunch of ferrite beads. Okay, so you can use that to keep the RF, and I'd put it at the input to the radio rather than up at the antenna, because you need that counterpoise for that thing to work. So I think that would help there. So I hope that answers the questions there. As far as winding the toroid, the key skill is patience. Hopefully the plans told you how many turns and that sort of thing. If you want to know what constitutes a turn for a toroid, it's where the wire goes through the center. So if you had a single wire, you had a toroid around that wire, that's a one-turn coil. Okay, so you count the number of times it goes through the center. That gives you what you want. Okay. Now, the coil, or the toroid itself will get a little warm, depending on how much power you put through it. You may want to be careful not to put full legal power through it, as you might shatter it. And that would be bad news. And it should be kind of housed somehow to keep the water out. Okay. I hope, Josh, I hope that helps. Brian Mullins, at least the plane will be down during the bad weather months. Well, the plane will fly. I flew it on Saturday. It was a coolish day, about 45 or 50 degrees. And there was almost no turbulence aloft, hardly a breath of air on the ground. Beautiful, sunny day. So it does have a cockpit heater in it, and I can, I can fly during the winter. We have a lot of days here that are very sunny during the winter, but that's all in the future, right? So, yes, and let's see. Andy Cowley, hi Dave, from 2 Echo 0 Romeo Echo Echo, and that would be in the UK. Okay. Philippe Lewis added $50 to the chat revenue. Thank you again. Due to the nature of the world now and the threats of using nuclear arms, how would the ionizing radiation affect radio signals? Would VHF and UHF get through like the ionosphere, or would all the signals get reflected? Well, that depends a great deal on where the nuclear burst occurs. The only, and I do mean the only, information that we have about widespread electromagnetic pulse is from the starburst tests conducted over Hawaii and in that area, the South Pacific, during the 1950s. They, for whatever reason, were just going to explode bombs anywhere they could. And so they put one on a rocket and exploded it above the atmosphere. And the results were immediate. They knocked out the power grid in Hawaii. And they also ruined a couple satellites. And they took as much data as they could. Now, the power system has been very thoroughly revamped since then. I remember as a child, if there was a lightning strike, you had to wait 2 or 3 hours for the truck to come out and reset things. Now all those breakers are self-resetting. So, and I mean, they'll try 2 or 3 times. If it's still not working, it'll shut down, and then they do have to send a truck. There is some concern about some of the larger transformers, that there really aren't any backups or spares, but again, they have extensive protection equipment. They had a section of the power grid go out in Ontario some years ago during a solar storm. And of course, other power grids didn't. That one did. There's talk about the Carrington event, which was a really bad solar event that caused all sorts of issues with telegraph lines. But then again, telegraph lines were not protected. So, what has happened since then? A lot of your electrical equipment, first of all, an electromagnetic pulse is very similar in many important regards to a lightning strike. And so lightning protection, oh gosh. So lightning protection equipment like your lightning surge protectors for ham radio are very, very important. The early transistor radios that came out were quite sensitive to this sort of thing, but now they've put in a lot of protective devices. Now, let's get back to the original question, which has to do with what Putin is claiming as warning might happen, and that is tactical nuclear strike. I mean, a tactical nuclear strike would be horrible from a radiation point of view, because the way the winds work in Russia, just like, remember, Chernobyl's in the Ukraine, okay? Chernobyl is in the Ukraine. So all that stuff that came out of Chernobyl will follow about the same pattern if there's a tactical nuclear strike there. It won't be near as much because, I mean, Chernobyl was a major disaster. It was humanity gone terribly wrong. It was an example of pride and hubris running amok. I've studied a fair amount about it. Tactical nuclear missile would not create quite as much radiation, but it would create enough that it would be a serious problem for anybody in the area. A tactical nuclear weapon would not be exploded high enough to directly affect the ionosphere. Now, whenever you explode a nuclear weapon, there is a bit of an electromagnetic pulse. But remember, the B-29 crews in Hiroshima were able to fly away from it. The biggest problem they had was the physical concussion of the blast wave on the aircraft, and they positioned the aircraft so it wouldn't be there. So it's not going to affect ham radio terribly, but it's been 70 years since the starburst tests, and everything you read about EMP all traces back to the starburst tests. There have been no other testing, in spite of the modern dates you might see on some Department of Homeland Security documents that is supposedly a modern assessment of EMP. But again, you follow the footnotes, which I've done, and they all go back to the starburst test. So I think that the problem with the tactical nuclear bomb is what would happen in terms of the aftermath. Because Russia to explode a tactical nuclear weapon is an affront to civilization and cannot be left unanswered. And you have the possibility of bad things, very bad things. It's, I just hope that doesn't happen. Would the UHF and VHF, we would not directly charge the ionosphere except locally. Okay, so. Sean, what did your wife say? She was very kind. She was very worried. She was very supportive. It was very nice. She wants me to sell the plane, and so on. Optical Man Jeff, KE0OG, has added $25 to the chat revenue. Says, thanks, Dave, for all your work and the live stream, your QST articles, and your information on the Hamfests. And where'd it go? This right here is the January article for QST. I just finished it this afternoon. I need to make some changes in some corrections in the manuscript and ship it off tonight. And I'm also behind getting up a video for the October issue, so I can't. October or November? November's been out for a while. I haven't done a video for that yet, and so I can't get paid for November, but I will soon. So I'll get that up there. So Optical Man Jeff, thank you very much for that. Joe McConaughey, KG0OG. I have a 160 meter loop at 60 feet. It works surprisingly well. Yes, it will. It will work very well. They do work. Sean. Hi, Sean. The most dangerous thing about flying is still the drive to the airport. Yes, especially here in Colorado. It used to be people in Colorado pretty much obeyed the speed limit, but during the pandemic, there was so little traffic that people got in the habit of speeding. And now it's like going down a California freeway. So, Dave, I have an Icom 5100A in the car, and it has a GPS. Is there a good reason to use it? Yes, for APRS. The reason it's there is so that if you are involved, for example, in emergency preparedness or emergency response, that the center station can keep track of where you are from the APRS. So APRS is a very old system. I think the guy who was major behind it just passed away recently, if I am putting my thoughts together correctly. But it does work, and your radio will use it. And there's two ways of using it. You can do it over the old analog, or you can do it digitally, and it all ends up in the same place. So you can track stuff. One thing I would like to remind people about APRS is one of the statistics transmitted with your information that will show up on the map that shows where you are is your speed. So if you turn on APRS and somebody who's watching it realizes you're doing 75 in a 55, guess what? You just transmitted that information. That's public information now. So if you're going to transmit APRS, keep in mind that somebody somewhere is watching your speed. And, oh, by the way, they keep eternal records of all of the APRS data. So you can go back a gazillion years to when APRS was first created and find every APRS packet. Billions of them. Okay, now the 5100, I believe, is a, let's see, it's ICOM, so it's digital, and it is D-Star, and you can do the APRS over D-Star too. It's primarily designed, and this is really weird, the unit that transmits the APRS information is called the tracker. And you go, what? No, it should be the sender or something like that. It's called the tracker. And then the receivers can track the trackers. So, but yeah, it's there. Servicing IQ, looks like I'm late, but my question is, using an SDR Duo, which has two antennas, would you have usage listening to the widest of frequencies, but also around Wi-Fi, Bluetooth for troubleshooting? Well, if those frequencies are under 2 gigahertz, yes, it will receive them. It's got two bands in there of 10 megahertz, separate receivers. You can run the receivers so that they're synchronized, which is great for diversity reception, and also You can use it for direction finding because it will actually see the difference in where it is in the wave. There's quite a few things the Duo can do that I've never explored. I've got one. Normally I use the RSB-1A, but I also have the Duo. The one in the middle, which was the DX, was given away as a prize, which reminds me we've got a few days left in October, so you can still enter the giveaway for this month. Okay, let's see. But yeah, you can listen around. Now, you know, we're not talking about an NSA level receiver here, so the bandwidth is only 10 megahertz, but still, if on HF, that's a third of HF right there, so you can get quite a bit. Okay, Brent in for BDW 915. Agreed. At the radio, mine cuts down on noise. Yes. KE0OG. Hi, Dave. Have you considered revisiting the DX Commander? It's sitting out back in the middle of the snow. I have promised that I will consider it one more time. And that is we're going to do a formal build of it where I will supervise the build. And then, you know, the antenna itself, I've already tested the antenna. It works fine. It's a fan vertical. It works fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a little flimsy. It's designed for portable use. But if you guide it properly, it'll probably stay up forever. I don't know how much the UV affects the plastic, but mine's been sitting on the back deck for 2 or 3 years, and it's not affected in any that I know about. So that would work fine. Richard Chandler, good to see and hear you as always. Question, does RL return loss numbers incorporate coax dB loss? If you are using an antenna analyzer from the radio end of the transmission line, you are measuring the combination of the antenna and the transmission line. So it will include coax dB loss. The problem is that if you have a lossy coax, you can lose enough signal in there that it will mask a poor SWR, because you lose some as it goes out, and then when the signal is reflected back, you lose part of that too. So when you run the ratios, it may look good, but it won't be. So I did a talk on that down at the Albuquerque convention, ham radio gathering, and oh, good grief. Where was I? Yes, you're measuring the combination of the two, so it incorporates the coax loss. However, if I were you, I would do the math to, figure out from the tables what your coax loss is and kind of back figure the SWR to see if you're really losing too much. Daniel L., one good question. If Vladimir does launch a tactical nuke, NATO and thus America gets involved in what would then be a world war, would they suspend amateur radio like they did last time? Who knows? If Russia launches a tactical nuclear weapon into NATO territory, that would be a really stupid thing to do, because that's an overt, blatant act of war. That's sort of an invitation to hit me back. Okay? Now, if he fired that weapon off outside of NATO, then like Ukraine's not part of NATO. Poland is, but Ukraine is not. They have now formally applied, but it's a little late. if he hit Ukraine with it, he has not hit NATO. Now, the radiation will come across NATO. So how do we respond to that? I will leave that to the generals, the president, the prime ministers, the NATO high command and all of that to figure out what to do with that. I think that anybody who would try launching a tactical nuke is terminally stupid. But then again, we've got Putin backed into a corner, and there really isn't a convenient way out. I thought maybe he could do what the U.S. did in Vietnam, declare victory and pull out. And then within the year, of course, North Vietnam had completely conquered South Vietnam. He could try something like that. But the problem is that the Russian people are becoming more aware of what's going on in spite of their news blackouts and stuff. And remember that Russian people are just as supportive of their own country as the Ukrainians are, or the British are, or the Americans are. And they feel like their pride has been besmirched. And so we've got hubris driving the whole thing right now. And fortunately, the Ukrainians appear to be making battlefield gains. But you've got to ask, is this a strategic retreat on the part of the Russians to prepare for something nasty? Remember what happened in World War II. Most of the action, a lot of Americans don't realize this, but most of the action was on the Eastern Front. And when Germany swept into Russia, they just overran everything. They got to the gates of Moscow. And so the Russians basically sucked the entire German military into Russia and then waited for winter. And the Germans were not equipped to handle winter. And from that point on, the end of 1941, when the Americans entered the war, Germany's military was always on its back foot. After that, the Russians just steadily advanced until they destroyed the German army. So are they going to try something like that? Is this a strategic retreat? I don't know. Don't let your understanding of the war be driven by the 24-hour news cycle. There are a lot of other things going on. Okay, let's see. We talked, would they suspend amateur radio? Maybe, maybe not. There wouldn't necessarily be a reason to over on this side of the world. So, Josh Hayes, thank you very much. That helps a lot. My call sign is CAM4SVD. My great uncle Cecil Myers, N4DEQ, was a ham operator and pilot as well. I was wondering if you've had a QSO with him on HF possibly. I would not know. I don't have a system where I can look up a call sign and determine that. Sorry. Theodore, 2 Echo 0 Golf India Yankee, says to Daniel, for that there are already pre-made scenarios. We can debate what could be better in that situation, but it was already decided. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. John Ward says, hi, Dave. W3OJ, hello. And Harry Rundle adds $5 to the chat revenue. Says, thank you, Dave, for your videos and this Q&A. I always learn something new from them. Well, thank you very much, Harry. 3Henry21 adds $50 to the chat revenue and says, 73, Dave. And thanks for all that you do. Got to run off to ClubNet. Conrad KN6 VMK. And we are getting close to 8 o'clock here. Leo Gustafsson, Russians, my family is from England. Theodore says, regardless if it will be NATO territory or not, there will be a reaction. Oh, yeah. The closest analogy is a hostage situation. As long as everybody yells, it is negotiation, but when bullets fire, next one can land, yes. Into a police officer, yes. Z Alpha Alpha 7F, I think that's the Saudi one. General Winter is fighting always beside Russians. Oh, gosh. You know, and they're very concerned because what the Russians did in pulling back was to leave a scorched earth behind. This is, again, from the Napoleonic Wars when Russia sucked Napoleon into Russia. But they exercised what they call a scorched earth policy. There was nothing left standing. There were no crops, there was nothing to eat, no shelter, no nothing. And they call that a scorched earth policy. So, yeah, fine, the French got in, but found themselves dying from disease, starvation, everything like that. And the Russian winters are legend. So, yeah, they could do something like that. Leo Gustafsson says, my family is from Finland, which just requested NATO membership, by the way. Let's see. General Winter is fighting always besides Russians. Yes, yes, yes. General Winter. General Winter is a very good soldier. And we're coming into winter, and the winters in Ukraine are bad. And they did that scorched earth thing, so there's no place for the Ukrainians to live there. And crops have been taken. The only real prize that is still outstanding is the big nuclear power plant. The Russians still occupy it, and the Ukrainians need it desperately to heat their homes in the winter. So that's going to be an issue. Joe Tyson, I work with many, many Russians, and not one of them support the war. All of them except one have left the country. They are as sick of it as we are. Well, that's good to hear. I know. I'm surprised that Russia let anybody out. I know during World War II, the British didn't. If you were of military age, you could not leave the country, period. Optical Man Jeff, don't forget to hit that like button. Leo Gustafsson, Finland. Did I not say that? My family is from Finland. Yes, Finland. And burn everything. Yeah, oh gosh. You know, if a UFO came from some other solar system and landed on the Earth today, would they be able to report back to their superiors that there is intelligent life on Earth? I wonder sometimes. I don't get it. I mean, in this day and age, people shooting each other in Europe is crazy. Of course, there's always war. Wars, as the scripture says, wars and rumors of wars. And that actually translates better as wars in near and far places. So anyway, we'll live through it. Thank you to all the people who have contributed so generously to chat, not contributed, can't use the word contributed, I'm not a charity, who have supported me so generously in the chat revenue. Thank you very much. Oh, now how did that, oh gosh. I've got, cancel, yes. I had Dragon Naturally Speaking up because I actually dictate my channel because my hands don't work very well. and I had 4 pages of this kind of text to narrate, so I narrated it into the machine, and it sometimes does it right, and sometimes does it wrong. You'd think after all these years of talking at it, it would have figured out what I really mean. You know, when I say SWR, it actually goes SWR. But in other times, I try to get a call sign in, and it just, nothing recognizable. No, Cornbread, I don't agree with you. He is an extraordinarily experienced politician, and he may look like he's just smiling, but he knows exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Exactly. I've done enough work for the federal government over my career in IBM that I have a tremendous respect for federal employees at all levels who, you know, find they didn't get the real high-paying jobs in industry. They're working for government, but they're dedicated, they care, they work hard. I've just developed a tremendous respect for them. People, I've worked with Forest Service. Let's see, what other agencies? A lot of the other stuff was DOD. Did a lot of work for as part of IBM and part of Lockheed for some 3-letter agencies and stuff. And I'm just impressed by how much they care and how well they work together. For example, you know, a lot of people, since 9/11, there has been a tremendous revolution in the United States and probably around the world in planning for contingencies. And even out here in the Intermountain West, where there's very low populations and so on, and you'd think things would be a little bit informal, they're not. For example, and I mentioned this in a recent Ask Dave column, there was a fire. Some farmer was burning his fields. They do that out here because the ash is potash, and it's a fertilizer. So they burn their fields usually every February or March. And one farmer was burning out the ditch. Well, the people who had laid the fiber optic cable that goes connects Ouray and Montrose had put it too close to the surface, and the fire actually melted the cable, so it cut off Ouray from Montrose. Well, the 9/11 dispatch is in Montrose, and so they had an emergency plan. Just flick of a switch, and all the 911 calls in Ouray County went directly to the home of the sheriff. And it was that way for 2 or 3 hours till they got everything fixed. So there was always somebody there to answer the 911 call. And when I broke my airplane on Tuesday, for those of you who just tuned in, I broke my airplane. I landed too hard and I broke off the front wheel. I walked away from it, and nobody hurt. Just my ego, which was severely damaged. But within moments, the people from the fixed base operator were there with their tug and everything that they needed. And then the ambulance actually came out onto the runway. And then the sheriff came. And the fire department was on its way too. I mean, it was just boom, automatic. You think a little Colorado town way out in the west, they had that boom, 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 all taken care of because they've done a tremendous amount of contingency planning. Now, if you are a ham and you want to get involved in emergency preparedness and things like that, understand that this contingency planning has been going on for some time. And the Department of Homeland Security has urged counties, this is mostly done at the county level, has urged counties to work with amateur radio organizations like ARES, RACES. Sometimes they'll have their own organization called Auxiliary Communications. And when they had all the issues in Florida, which I guess they're still having, it's very easy to put a ham at a gathering point for refugees and, you know, people who suddenly become homeless and so on. And the hams can handle the health and welfare information and let the professionals deal with, you know, rescue and security and all of those kinds of things that they deal best with. Plus, the Red Cross has a memorandum of understanding with the ARRL for support, and the official organization in the United States that manages emergency response for refugees, in other words, helps people find housing and so on, is the Red Cross. So if you want to donate to an organization that is directly helping people like in Florida or Puerto Rico or so on, it's the Red Cross. Now, yes, I know that the Red Cross has administrative expenses. They just do. I mean, they've always got to be ready and so on. So, you know, you pick your favorite organization. I know my church, the Mormon Church, does a lot of disaster relief and so on. We keep warehouses around the country full of disaster supplies, ostensibly to support our own membership, but I mean, the stuff would go bad if we waited for that. So we're constantly rotating it, and overages are donated to soup kitchens. And, you know, when the Red Cross needs 40,000 blankets, the church can pop up with 40,000 blankets just like that. So, yeah, support those existing organizations. Join ARES, join RACES, join Mars, all of these different organizations, and especially find out what your local county is doing. And by the way these people are organized is standardized around the country by FEMA. FEMA has a series of courses on emergency response and how to do it, how a command center works, what the standard messages are, who's in charge of this, who's in charge of that, and that is all worked out in advance. And if you go from one incident command center, ICS, here to an incident command center in New Jersey, they both operate the same. This is the great transformation that has taken place under the covers, out of sight, in our government to support these disasters and stuff like that. Now, the big problem with Florida is going to be that most people didn't have flood insurance. And FEMA has very mixed feelings about this. Why should they help somebody rebuild who doesn't have flood insurance when Joe Blow over here did pay for his flood insurance and should get his house rebuilt? And the problem is there are so many people who don't have flood insurance that what choice does the government have? They have to help out. IBM's the three-letter agency. Yes, it is. Okay. John Ward, thank you for your consideration. Retire patient prescription. Leo Gustafson, thank you for your service, Dave, and to all my fellow veterans. Thank you. Tom, good to hear you say that, Dave. Our government is not our enemy. No, they are not. They're very hardworking, dedicated Americans. I have met many dozens, maybe hundreds of government employees, both within and without those little three-letter agencies, and they're all doing their hardest. to serve you. So, good news is I walked away. Yes, I did. Joe Tyson, oh wow, glad to see you're okay. Yes, I walked away. Roman Saunerowitz, Dave, I just tuned in. I'm so sorry you broke your plane. Yeah, I broke it. Glad you are okay. I landed my plane hard once and blew a tire. I know what it feels like. Hope your plane is repairable. So do I. The big thing is there was a prop strike, so that meant that the engine came to a halt very quickly. And when you take that much mass, remember, mass is reactive. Mass is not like resistance. Friction is resistance. Mass has inertia, which is the mechanical equivalent of inductance. Okay? Meaning that once it gets going, it doesn't want to stop. And so you've got that thing spinning around in there with all that mass, pistons going up and down, and the rods doing their thing, and the crankshaft's going around, and the flywheel is flying, and all of a sudden it comes to a halt. Well, it doesn't like to do that. And so things can break when it does that. And so that's what they're going to look for. They're going to take a look at that. If the engine needs to be rebuilt, it might get to the point where the cost plus the salvage value of the airplane exceeds the insured value, in which case they'd cash me out. I don't really want to do that. What I'd rather do, I'd insured for about what I bought it for, but the market's gone up. The plane's worth more now. So I'd like them to fix it, and then if we sell, I get a little bit more for it. But there you go. Anyway, good news is okay. Yes, I am okay. Glad you are okay. I landed. Okay, the tire. Optical man Jeff. We had a speaker come to our ham club from Red Cross, and we thought they wanted us for our radio experience, but all they wanted was our blood and said they never heard of us for radio comm. Well, you're talking to the wrong part of the Red Cross. The Red Cross is a huge organization, and they are very partitioned into the various pieces and so on. And it depends on what kind of an agreement you have, and the people you need to reach agreement with is not the Red Cross, but with the County Emergency Operations Center. Every county in the United States has an EOC, and they all have a plan for contingencies. And if you want your ham radio organization to be included as part of that plan, you've got to take the initiative to go down and say, here are resources, here are people who are willing to do this. And now they require that to participate in this, that you have a background investigation and fingerprints and stuff like that. They're just being doubly careful. It's not like the ad hoc responses of yesteryear. So, let's see. I'm a local volunteer fire chief. Thank you for making this known. Volunteers are desperately needed in this day and age. Talking to the ARRL CEO and president at Pacificon, they are going to make 2023 the year of the volunteer, because the league is having this problem too. They don't have enough volunteers to cover everything that needs to be done. And this is true everywhere, your local ham radio club, trying to find officers. I mean, the nominating committee is always having a hard time finding anybody who's willing to serve. Americans are very busy, especially now that the pandemic's over. And this idea of an 8-to-5 job is history. And people are busy. People don't have time anymore for fraternal organizations like the Masons or the Elks. They don't have time to, be president of the Women's Club or whatever. So, yeah, they're going to try and focus on this next year about the need to volunteer. There's a lot of work that needs to be done that's not paid. Somebody's got to do it. And, You know what? There's this old aphorism about everybody said somebody should do it, but nobody said they would, or something like that. Now, you know, you play games with the thing, and you find out the same type of thing. Okay, John Ward, a friend of mine in Florida said that a lot of that insurance companies stopped providing insurance. The flood insurance is provided by FEMA, not the private insurance companies. The private insurance companies act as administrators for the flood insurance, but it's FEMA that provides it. And FEMA has a huge organization, I know because I work closely with it on a project, that maps the United States to determine where the flood hazard areas are. Now, if FEMA had its way, nobody would be able to build in those areas because they're prone to flooding. And what they really hate is having to pay to rebuild the same house 3 times, you know. They say, don't. This has caused quite a bit of problem in New Orleans because a lot of the areas that flooded there during whatever that hurricane was were black and Hispanic areas. And FEMA doesn't want to rebuild the area because it's 9 feet below sea level. And so the residents of the area are saying, you're discriminatory, you're discriminating against blacks. And FEMA is saying, that may be, but it's really stupid to rebuild here, let's rebuild somewhere else for you. And there are still people living down there in emergency housing. So it's a very thorny problem. People like to build near water. Okay? And that's great until the water suddenly becomes a 20-foot storm surge. And you noticed in how in the news a lot of those houses are built on stilts, and the ones that had slightly higher stilts are okay, they're standing. That's because the water went under them. That's why they're like that. If you're a little bit too low, the water will come under and up like that. That's an issue. We're out of time. Okay, Tail End Charlie again, supper and movie at Ham Club tonight. Trayford is here. John Ward, correction, I'm a retired patent examiner. We worked real hard. My name is on a number of IT inventions as the examiner. Well, I have 2 patents. I'll have to check. Yes, Americans are very busy. I see 7,300 alternatives. That is not a Yaesu. I don't think there are any. There's a Kenwood TS590G, but that's a pretty old radio. The new Yaesu alternative is the 720. I have the brochure for you here. I picked it up at Pacificon. I actually saw one. The competitor has been the Yaesu FT991A or B or whatever it is. But yeah, Katrina, thank you. Okay, they're discriminating against elevation. Yes, I know. When I lived in Florida, I lived in Tampa, we were 4 feet above sea level. When Hurricane Frederick came through, it flooded up to within about a ½ inch of coming into our house. We got about a quart of water in the house, and that was it. And then it took a long time. We had 18 inches of rain in 11 hours. But the eye of the storm did not go over us. It was out to sea. So, thank you all very much for your sympathy and kindness regarding the little airplane thing where I broke the front wheel off the airplane while landing. And I'm very grateful that I was able to walk away from it. I mean, literally, there was no slam bam or anything. I mean, it hit kind of hard, but this way. But anyway, the seat seemed to absorb it. Anyway, thank you all very much. I really love you guys. This is great. I love doing this every week. So, let's see. We peaked out at 153 concurrent viewers. The chat revenue for the evening was $280. I will try to put that to good use. Good use. And we will see you. John, yes, you're right. Okay, thank you, Harry. I appreciate it. So, until we next meet, 73.